Good afternoon. Welcome to my presentation. My name is Thang. I am currently working at International University at Vietnam National University in Ho Chi Minh City. And today I'll be talking about a research project that I did when I was doing my MA degree in the UK. And the project name is called Pragmatic Routines in the Study Abroad context, in which I'll be looking into how Vietnamese students, when they were doing a MA degree abroad in the UK, how well they're doing, how well they're using certain routines or fixed phrases in certain contexts of use within the academic context or in daily life usage. Yeah, so before we start, I think it will be helpful to have a little bit of introduction about me. My name is Thang, as I mentioned before. This is a picture of me presenting. Um, I didn't know why I choose this one. I did my MA degree at Nottingham Trent University. I have a lot of questions in my mind. And now, as I mentioned before, I work as an English lecturer at International University, or IU. So a little bit of background and introduction into why I did this project, or how this project came to start. First of all, I came up with this project when I was listening to a group of friends that I happened to have the chance to be a part of in my when I was doing my MA degree in the UK. So here they are at the British Museum. When I noticed that some of our friends performs a little bit better in certain sort of contexts, in certain contexts, like for example, buying tickets at the museum, they know like what to say in the beginning, what to say at the end. And so there are certain fixed phrases that they are using that was quite helpful in terms of communicating the message across compared to other students who I assume didn't have the knowledge of these fixed phrases. And so I think this is a useful and interesting project to do in my MA degree, and that's what I did. Particularly, I think the project was relevant to me because I'm interested in formulaic language. Like how you say, like how you say, sorry, I'm late, and it sort of makes sense in different in a specific context, and sort of help you go out, have you see a way out in a conversation. I'm also interested in the efficiency of formulaic language, or rather, like I mentioned before, how fixed phrases can help you sort of communicate your message without thinking too much. And in communication, I think that is quite efficient for, especially for second language users like me. I'm also interested in intercultural communication. Like I mentioned before, the inspiration is from my friend, and they're all from different backgrounds, from different cultures, and somehow their second language is always English. And I found it interesting to see how they are using it. And finally, it's the study abroad context that is interesting to me. So a little bit of literature review and research gap. What others have done essentially is what I'm trying to answer. What others have done. So the thing about pragmatics is that it's a field of language that focuses on language in language from the point of view, from the perspective view of the viewer. And so you have two branches or sub branches of pragmatics. The first branch is pragmalinguistics, which is related to grammar, or rather the structures, the lexicon that you are using in everyday life. And another sub branch is social pragmatics, which is related to sociology, so how you are using it in everyday life, and what sort of rules are you using, and what sort of norms are you adhering to when you are using your language. So this is rich, influential dichotomy of pragmalinguistics and social pragmatics. Um, and that's essentially what pragmatics is, essentially, yeah, looking at things from a grammar point of view, but also from sociology point of view. And so this is where pragmatics routines came in. So a couple of examples of pragmatic Sorry, a couple of examples of pragmatic routines could be, when you're at the shops, so you say, I'm just browsing, thanks. Or when you're late to a meeting with your tutor, you usually say, I'm sorry, I'm late. When someone offers you more food, you say, no, thanks, I'm full, if you don't want it. Or when you're working for a restaurant, you say, how can I help, whenever a customer comes in, and many other phrases like, there you go, eat in or take away, can I borrow a pen, or watch out. So these phrases, these formulaic languages, they have a specific context in use, in which almost certainly native speaker will use these phrases to sort of go through with their conversation, or rather to do things with the language. And so it's very quick. It is almost constantly repeated in everyday use. And so presumably when you go to study abroad, as a second language learner, you have the opportunity to learn these phrases. And that is what the literature says. You have the opportunity to see or to be a part of the context for you. So for example, if you are studying at a university, then obviously you also need to book an appointment with your tutor, and more likely or not, you be late and you have to use the phrase, sorry, I'm late. And also because of language, the amount of language contact that you're receiving, because now everyone around you, more likely or not, will speak English. And so you have more opportunity to practice. But the thing is that when people study these routines in the literature, the gap begins to reveal itself when it comes to the type of data they're collecting. So normally people will use discourse completion task, as you can see on the left. So it gives you a situation. You are in class and you need to write something down, but you realize you forgot your pen at home. You tell the classmate sitting next to you, and then the participant, they will write their response in the spaces. And then, the researcher will collect all of the written data and use them as representative of oral performance. And so I think that is quite not fair, really. So Butterby Halleck, the same writer for this discourse completion task on the left, as you can see, she proposes that in order to sort of in order to investigate oral information, you need or to collect oral data interactively, preferably. So in the same situation, if you do role play, obviously the kind of data that you're collecting will be more representative. So as you can see on the right, there are a lot of differences in the way that they sort of borrow the pen. So one participant might say, hey buddy, have you got any pens? I forgot it at home. Another participant might say, do you have an extra pen? I think I forgot mine. Can I borrow yours? So the length and the way that they use the language will be different when it comes to oral data collection. And so in my research, in my study, I asked one big questions really, and then I asked two sub-questions, and then I asked two sub-questions. The first question, the main questions I asked is that, is there a difference in the production of pragmatic routines across the three groups of participants, which I will talk about later? Then I asked, to what extent is routine production influenced by acculturation, or rather the readability of a non-native language speaker to adapt to a new culture, which in this case is the UK. And then the second sub-question is, to what extent is routine production influenced by language contact, or the amount of language that they use or they are exposed to on average in a week. So how I answer the research questions, or rather to answer the questions of methodology, I use 4 tools to answer the corresponding questions. So first I'll use a role play task of 10 situations, which I adapted from the study by Butterby Halleck and Bastos in 2009. to answer the first question or the main question, to really collect the oral data and compares and contrast between the three groups. Then I use a language context survey, which is adapted from Taguchi's research in 2008 to measure the amount of language contact to with English and with their native language, which is Vietnamese. Then I use an adaptive tool, which is revised sociocultural adaptation scale by Wilson in 2013, in which a participant will self-report their readiness to the different challenges and difficulties that they might encounter when they go and live abroad. And finally, I adapted a semi-structured interview from Sanchez Hernandez 2017 in order to dig in a little bit more about to collect and to analyze this data qualitatively in order to maybe answer and triangulate with the quantitative data with the quantitative tools that I have been using above. And so for the first, for the role play, I will mainly ask two questions. I will ask whether the speech act in that situation has been realized or not, and whether the participant, they are able to produce the routine that I'm seeking for. So for example, for participant number 3, as you can see on the left, participant number 3, when they borrow a pen, they say, "Hey buddy, have you got any pens? I've got it at home." So they did ask they did realize a speech act of request, but they did not use the routine. So I will give them 1 score, okay, for speech act realized. But for participant number 8, he or she might say, "Do you have an extra pen? I think I forgot mine. Can I borrow yours?" So that structure, can I borrow yours, is actually pretty close to the routine I'm looking for, which is, "Can I borrow your pen?" And so that our participant will be rewarded with a higher score because the routine is used, but it's not fully realized in that sense. So the score will be a little bit higher, 1.5 in total. My sample will include a total of 26 participants. So we have 11 students who are currently living in Vietnam, but they are going to go to the UK and do their MA degree in the next 3 months. So the length of stay in the UK is not available. They haven't been to the UK at all. The sojourning group, or the group that are staying at the UK at the moment for 6 months, I have 11 participants. And then I also had the opportunity to collect data from 4 participants who are who have been living in the UK for at least 18 months. So they will be in the extended stay group. That will be their group. They are all Vietnamese students, and they are all studying at Nottingham Trent University in Nottingham in the UK. What I did to and the analysis that I used to answer my questions, mainly 2 in terms of quantitative data analysis. First is I'll use a one-way analysis of variance to answer the question of to see the differences between different groups and their use of language routines. Mainly, I will measure or compare the means of their scores in all of the situations. And then I will also use Pearson correlation to see the relationship between their use of routines with the amount of contact that they are exposed to in the UK, to the amount of language contact that they have in the UK, and also Pearson correlation to measure or to examine the relationship between routines and the degree of acculturation. So what I found is, or rather the results of my study, well, for the first question, or the main question, is there any differences between the 3 groups? So for both routine used and the speech act realization, I found that there's no statistical difference in the total score of each group. So with a p-value of 0.551 or significantly higher than than 0.05. So there's no statistical difference between the means for each group in this aspect. However, when I look a little bit closely to each situation, then a little bit of and more interesting things start to come out. For example, in certain situation, like in a messy house situation, where you have to say sorry for the mess, the majority of at-home students did not apologize. They rather make excuses, and they request the participant. They request the listener to sort of go somewhere else and not look at the mess entirely. Or for the late situation where they have to say, sorry, I'm late to their professor, or in a store situation where they have to say, no thanks, I'm just looking, when they don't want to be followed around by a store assistant. So in these two situations, they were able, the at-home students or the students who haven't been to the UK, they were able to perform, to realize the speech act of apologizing or of refusal, but they did not use the routine. The majority of them missed the routine entirely, or the fixed phrases entirely. Okay, and when I'm looking at the sort of the oral data from a discourse level, what I found is that, you know, during that interaction with me as the interviewer, a lot of at-home students, they use more mitigation devices to make requests. So for example, they'll say, sorry if I bother you, or they have the tendency to lengthen their turn, rather than the sojourning students. And this is quite surprising to me when they borrow a pen. So for example, one at-home student might say, sorry to bother you, I forgot my pen at home, can I borrow yours? And I hope this is not big of a problem. You know, they lengthen their length with a lot of mitigation devices. And also they were using fewer intensifiers to apologize, which I think is quite a difference between the two groups compared to the sojourning group. The sojourning group, they use more intensifier, like sorry, I'm really sorry that I'm late. So really sorry, or I'm deeply sorry that I'm late. This tendency to use intensifier is much fewer, is much smaller in the at-home group when they're talking to their professor. So I think that is quite interesting. In terms of acculturation and the use of pragmatic routines, well, I run the data, so I run the self-reported data from the revised sociocultural adaptation scales with the way that students with the way that students realize the speech act, or with the way that participant use the routine, or can produce the form of the routines. And what I found is that there's no statistical difference in the score of acculturation to any of these aspects. So there's not much of a strong connection between how ready you are to adapt to a new culture, and how well you can sort of realize the speech act, or use the routines that is required, or that is common or salient in that situation. The same story goes with language contact and the use of pragmatic routines. However, in language contact, there was one thing that is interesting, which is the way that a participant, they realize the speech act, and the degree of contact that they have with English, but in the academic context. So when students are using English, whether they are in lecture halls, or whether they are at a tutor group, or maybe normally at a seminar, then there's a tendency for students to sort of there's this negative correlation between how they realize the speech act and the degree of contact that they have with English in the academic context, which I found is interesting, which will be explained further by the data from the semi-structure interview. And also there's a negative correlation between the routine that participants are using with the degree of contact in with Vietnamese. So obviously the more that they use Vietnamese, the less likely that they will be able to sort of pick out, you know, the context in use, the routines that are available or salient in the context in the study abroad environment. And so some data, some quotes, some ideas from the semi-structured interview can help, you know, shed some light into this trend. For example, some participants, they say the MA course lacks interaction opportunities. Like I mentioned before, most of them said that when they were doing the MA course, the majority of what they're doing is reading and writing, and not a lot of spoken interaction. And so it's really hard in the academic context for them to pick up these phrases, even though it is just as simple as, you know, borrowing a pen might be too challenging because they don't have the opportunity to sort of asking for help like that anymore. But something that is interesting is that the differences between the what should I say, the high performing group, you know, and like there's a group that perform significantly better than the other group, and the difference they say is that it's due to socializing, with the fact that they are able to socialize outside the classroom, where they have the chance to talk to not just native but also non-native speakers and pick up the new phrases. And they reported two problems when they are socializing. Is if they're socializing with someone who is from the same background as they are, so like the sojourning group, they have a community, and if the solidarity of that community is strong, then there's a chance that might hinder the socializing effort of the participants. So the closer you are with the group of Vietnamese abroad students, you study abroad student, then the less chances you have to socialize with, and use English and pick up on new phrases. And also there's a problem when communicating with native speaker in a sense that native speaker, they tend to have these non-native norms when communicating with non-native speakers. And so one participant said that native speakers tend to act like they understand what the participant is saying, even though the participant realizes and very well aware that their language use is not so good and in terms of grammar or in terms of fluency. But this is not a problem. This tolerance from native speakers tend to be a problem when they were you know, sort of picking up on phrases. So there's no chance for feedback and correction. And so, you know, that moment when native speakers say, oh, you should have said something like this. You should have said just, sorry, I'm late, instead of stretching it to a long term, for example. So what does the result means, or rather discussion and implication of this project? So as you can see, it is quite a small project, but I hope that the implication from this is going to be useful for your students, especially when they're studying abroad. So for international students, you know, this environment and the results from the studies tells us that the study abroad environment might not essentially be just, you know, improving oral communication. Most students, they think that when they go abroad, they can, you know, improve their speaking skills, but they have to adjust their expectation, because the majority of especially master programs involves writing and reading and not a lot of discussion. So if you want to improve your English, more likely than not, you have to socialize outside the classroom or seek out opportunities to socialize yourself. And that is the implication for international students if they want to improve oral communication. For language teachers, this stresses the importance of fixed phrases, or rather pragmatic routines, in a language classroom. Most of a lot of language teachers, they focus too much on accuracy, and not a lot on fluency. But the role of pragmatic routines, as we have mentioned before, is both to improve speaker accuracy and improve their fluency, because these fixed phrases fit in right well in certain contexts where speaker doesn't have to think too hard about their language use. For research in pragmatics, this raises the importance of correcting oral data to represent oral communication, as opposed to written discourse completion tasks, which I think is counterproductive. But at the same time, it has its qualities of being able to collect a large amount of data. But however, things are much more different and much more representative when you interview a student face to face, instead of having them write down their responses. For research in intercultural pragmatics, this is also this studies could imply that the sort of the way that non-native users use fixed phrases could not be is like a lot of non-native speakers. A lot of my participants, most of them, when I interviewed them, they said that they did not have the opportunity to use these phrases a lot with native speaker, and the majority of the people that they talk to are non-native speaker, because they're international students, so they might talk to someone from China, someone from Malaysia, and it is quite worthwhile to look into the routine use in this context as well, instead of using the benchmark set by native speakers when they're using pragmatic routines. And also an implication for me is that maybe in the future, if I were to do this kind of research again, and a more useful tools that I can use is a naturalized role play task proposed by Thang in 2006, in which the ability to collect a more representative data in the empirical research is much better. The data is more natural, is in that sense. So if you want to know more about this tool, then I suggest you go and look for this paper by Trung in 2006, which I think is quite interesting. Also, because the nature of the time I have to conduct this research is not too long, so I did not have the opportunity to do longitudinal study, which I know by heart is much better in the sense that you can track the changes of one group of participants over time, instead of doing it cross-sectionally, which is not really representative of the language use. And also, I need to think more into the sampling method. So again, due to time constraints, most of the participants that were recruited are through this convenient sampling method, whereas a more reliable method, where there's a sizable percentage of people from different backgrounds, would be a much more representative, would produce more representative results. And also, I need to look into the prior knowledge of routine. So I didn't test this, but apparently after the test is finished, some students said, hey, in the situation, I might have studied these phrases when I was learning a language program, for example, or when I was going to to Singapore, for example. So they went abroad as well, or they study in class, and they picked up on these routines, not necessarily in the study abroad environment, but if they know about the routines in advance, then certainly that would be a game changer, and that will affect the reliability of the research. So I need to sort of be aware of that and filter out the people who knows about the routine before the next time if I were to do this research again. And that's it. That's the end of my presentation. I hope it's not too boring for you. So, a routine at the end that I usually use, or British people usually use, is cheers, even though we're not drinking anything. And so if you want some follow-up discussions, you're more than welcome to email me. My email address is ndmthang@icmiu.edu.vn. And so if you email me, I will reply within days. But I'm more active on Facebook, so you can find me at facebook.com/minthang 269, and typically I'll reply within hours. So I hope you have a great Friday. It's been a great pleasure presenting to you guys. And if you have any questions, like I mentioned before, you know how to contact me. So that's it for now. Goodbye. Enjoy your weekend.